Paranormal investigators, ghost chasers and occult enthusiasts of Reddit, what times have you been truly convinced something otherworldly was going on? I've posted about this on Reddit before, but our house is haunted as all get out. We've had 2 mediums tell us that they've never encountered more paranormal activity in any single place than our house. The people from TV show Rescue Mediums held a workshop in our town 5 years ago. My wife really wanted to go but hadn't pre-registered. As she walked into the event and up to the registration table, one of the mediums told her she didn't need to register. She knew all about my wife and our house. In fact, part of the reason they chose our town for their workshop was our place. I'm personally insensitive to the spooks, but my wife, our son and one of our daughters see spooks at our place all the time. Appliances misbehave on a regular basis and random things go missing for weeks only to turn up again in obvious places. What kinds of things do your wife and kids see? Sexy ghost butts. Okay, no joke. As a child 2-3 years old, I played a lot by myself, usually in the hallway between my mother's room and the bathroom. My mother was so surprised about my linguistic abilities. I was talking so well, but what freaked her out was she would hear me say a word wrong and then say, "Oh okay," then correct myself. When we went to the video store, I always wanted to watch Crocodile Dundee. My family made fun of it, saying that I had a thing for accents. Was born to live in Australia. You know, just joking around with each other. One day my mom had enough of that movie and asked me why I loved it so much. I told her, they were like the man in the bathtub. My mother freaked out. You see, our apartment building was an old converted Victorian. Our bathroom was one of the first installed in our town, and the original tub was claw-footed, abnormally long, and always icy cold. When my mother moved in, she made the comment that it was big enough to float in. The manager said it had been a custom-made tub for the owner, who had been quite tall. The original owner had been Australian. I explained that he sat in the tub and we talked. My mother made me play in the living room only. We moved out as soon as the lease ended. This right here is what terrifies me about having kids. I'ma move into the house of my dreams, have my lil family and stuff, and my kid's gonna be like, "Who's the and point to nothing," and I'ma be like, "Well, frick Timmy." Oh boy, there's been a few times. All of them were relatively funny in one way or the other, considering I take no so-called spirit seriously, which, as you can imagine, probably pees them off. You ever have a laptop thrown at you by a spirit because you called them a big dumb nerd? I have. The comb fiasco and the laptop situation were the 2 where I was most convinced, and promptly got my mom to do her fun little cleansing the house thing she was taught by her very doped out mom when she was a kid. The laptop situation is the shortest, so I'll just tell that one. It was nearly 2 a.m. I'm being an idiot and watching people read Reddit/creepy PMS, and I hear this sort of soft skittering noise. My service dog at the time, Buster, sort of lifts his head, looks around, and decides nothing is there before laying back down. I decide to trust his doggy senses, and go back to my video. I hear it again, and actually stop and turn around and look at my small, dark room. The room wasn't very big. I think I had enough room for a queen bed, my desk, and a small dresser that I had to shove at the end of my bed and just deal with having to squeeze my fat butt through the gap between it and the wall. Not very big at all. So I stare at my closet, assuming that there's some sort of big huge bug in there. Bugs get big in Texas, man, because I don't see one on the floor and there's not much that isn't illuminated by my laptop screen. I'm about to turn around when I hear it again, and it sounds more like paper being rubbed against hardwood floors this time, and my closet door sort of shakes a bit. There's obviously no windows in my closet, no AC vents in my room, and by extent, no fan, which meant death to me during the summer, so on and so forth. I make sure to run through every possible explanation before writing it off as Jared, our residential ghost. Yeah, we had a residential ghost. He liked coffee, stealing toolboxes, misplacing combs, and scaring the heck out of me when I was home alone. Anyway, I scoff when I realize it's just Jared, and demand that, "Jared, you big dumb nerd, stop that right now before I get my mom," as if some 30-year-old cosplayer is going to scare off an actual ghost. Regardless, it stops, and a few minutes later I go to get in bed. My desk has this sort of dip in the front middle that I just realized was for a keyboard, but I used to put my laptop on it because my chair was rather down low and it was awkward to put it anywhere else. I would put my charger through the small gap between the dip and the desk. It sort of hung down like an inch, and was its own little platform that sort of swung. Don't ask. It was $15, so I'm not complaining. And my laptop would just stay there. What I'm getting at is not only was my laptop contained in this dip by an inch high wall, but the charger was through the gap and keeping it there as well. Well, I lay down, cuddle buster, and start to fall asleep. And just as I'm about to finally drift into that sweet void, my laptop hits me in the face. Very hard. My nose promptly started bleeding everywhere. Buster was barking like mad, and I was left very confused as to how my laptop just did that. It was still plugged into the charger, but there was no way it could have gotten out of that dip without unplugging the charger. So I was left very confused and bloody, and ended up sleeping in the living room where no laptops could be used as a weapon against me. Freaking Jared. If you're liking this video, please feel free to like it and subscribe. I had something similar happen to me. Not as violent though. I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment that was almost 150 years old. So naturally, it has a lot history and a lot of previous lives. My spirit hated when I closed the kitchen window. If I did close and lock it, all my light bulbs would burn out within hours of each other, and he found it real funny to turn my shower head so that it would drench me when I turned it on. All silly things and minor inconveniences. We lived together peacefully for 2 years. One night though, I was trying to go to sleep because I had an early morning class exam. I kept hearing murmuring in closet. Wasn't anything distinguishable, but clearly a conversation going on. I sat up and said, "Hey y'all, I have a final tomorrow and need to sleep. I'm putting my earplugs in. Continue on and good night." I'm almost asleep when something kicked the shit out of my bed hard enough that I felt the foot of the mattress sink in. I sat straight up, took my earplugs out, and didn't sleep until the next day. I bought a book about evoking demons. The book arrived. I read it half a dozen times and then the odd dreams started. Occasionally, I have pretty odd dreams, so I changed my diet and ignored them. I read the book a couple more times, found the entity with which I wanted to work, and began gathering supplies to do so. The first item showed up in the mail and I started working on making the items. My boss, overnight, became an angry and mean-spirited person. My truck tires went flat one night. My furnace quit working and I got the sickest I've ever been. I buried the book and the items I'd made had half done at a crossroads, and suddenly, all the bullshit stopped. Thus begins and ends my career with the Gosha. About 10 years ago, I lived with my grandparents in this rural town in the middle of a cornfield. Population 150, that includes the animals. My grandfather is a huge minimalist and insisted we did not use the air conditioner during the summer. So we spent a lot of time outside because the house was too hot. I started to camp in the yard instead of staying in my upstairs bedroom where the heat seemed to hold longer. Every night, I would move my tent a little further from the farmhouse. No one was around to mess with me, so my grandparents didn't mind as long as I came home the next morning for breakfast. One evening, there was a meteor shower I wanted to see, but the glare from the one street lamp we had next to the house really screwed with star visibility. I spoke with my grandmother and she gave me permission that night to camp in the woods. I've played there many times during the day, so I knew the area pretty well. There is one big circular clearing that would be perfect to set up in. It was really far from the house, but again, no one lived out here except us. I pitched my tent around sunset in the center of the clearing. Looking up, the canopy was nowhere near to obscuring my view of the sky. It was absolutely perfect. Later that evening I was awake reading, and around 10:30 I hear a noise from the woods, but not a normal woodland sound. The only way I can describe it is like two quarters were being dropped together, chaying. It was really rhythmic too. I remember trying to reason it out and I came up with a raccoon playing with some barn litter it found in a creek. I went back to reading. At 11:30 I'm trying to sleep, but the noise still hasn't stopped. I'm irritated, so I grab my flashlight, my phone, and I quietly move to the corner of my tent where the zipper to open the door is. I didn't turn on my light. I was waiting to get outside before I did. I became aware of a pressure on the side of my head. Someone was trying to reach through my tent to touch me. I can still remember the slow, steady pressure I felt going down the side of my face as I froze with fear. It was a heavy, slow pet that started on the top of my head and ended on my chin. After seconds that felt like minutes, I threw myself away from the corner. I saw and heard nothing. The chiming had stopped. I jumped back up, ripped my tent open, looked around the clearing. Nothing. I called my grandmother. I have a little brother and I wanted to make sure he was in bed even though he was terrified of the dark. While she was checking, I jogged around the clearing, looking and listening for anyone. She confirmed he was still in bed, and that no one but me was out there. I never found anything or anyone, but it was too far for me to walk home that night, so I crawled back into my tent and tried to sleep. I remember listening for the chinging again, but it was so quiet. No frogs, no crickets, just the wind carrying an impending feeling of dread, until the sun rose the next morning. We don't have any large predators in our area, and the canopy was too far from my tent to have something fall on me. To this day, I have no idea what it was. I just tear up and get goosebumps every time I think about it. And no, I never went back there at night. I used to do Ouija boards with an ex. This one time, after we had finished, a fork flew off the table. When it landed on the floor, it witched. The fork was in the middle of the table. Another time, we did one in her bedroom and the last message was "we will be known." We stopped and my ex went downstairs. The only other person in the house was her mother, and I heard Jaya go into the bathroom and lock the door, so I know where everyone is. Then I heard a thump on the bedroom door. I don't move. Hear ex come upstairs and she enters the bedroom. I can't recall what we chatted about then, but her mum then came out of the bathroom and came up to our room asking, "Was this one of you two?" We said no. What happened? She held up a tea light that was flattened on the own side, as if it had been thrown at the door. I have other stories from that time, that if I ever find corroborating evidence for, will point to evidence for, will be proof to me of a spirit realm. Until then, these are the only events that mean I need an open mind on something. Ha 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 he ho ha hey. If you like this video, please feel free to like it and subscribe, or don't. I'm not your boss.